MultiVersus. That is the game that we're going to talk about today, and it is an interesting one. Some people have asked me about my opinions on MultiVersus, so instead of, just answering that question like a normal person would in like a normal conversation, I thought, why not just talk about it in a video, and then I could just direct them to the video. So yeah, that's what we'll be doing. So MultiVersus is yet another platformer fighter that's coming out. There seems to be a lot of these now. We just had Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl, and it seems now that WB is coming into it. It seems like there's a trend now with trying to get, different IPs together into some kind of like platformer fighter game. Now, I do think that MultiVersus doesn't look entirely bad, but I do have one main concern with it. I'll get to that in a second. I just want to point out what I believe are the positives for the game, as I think there are a lot more positives than there were with Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl. And I also think that that was kind of done on purpose. Like, there are certain things in the reveal trailer or reveal video where it felt like they were specifically tackling certain criticisms that All-Star Brawl had that MultiVersus doesn't have, like, as an issue. Like, for instance, the one major thing is that there's voice acting. They got, like, Maisie Williams, Kevin Conroy, Tara Strong, and a bunch of other, people who voiced these original characters or acted as these original characters, and pretty much got them to just, come back for this game. They did voice lines for MultiVersus, which is really cool. And usually I would think that like voice acting is not something that I would be like, oh my god, that's a selling point, because that's like something you kind of just come to expect when you purchase a video game. But if you didn't play Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl, believe it or not, there is none of that. There is no voice acting in any way. Like, you can play as Aang, Korra, SpongeBob, all these characters, but not a single one of them has any voices at all recorded for this game. It's just they're all mute, and it feels very odd and weird. Like, you have like someone will get punched in the face and there's like this sound effect for them getting hit, but there's like no voice from the person hitting them. There's no, I don't know, grunt or something for when the person gets hit. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And they spent a good amount of time on Twitter specifically advertising the fact that they have, all these voice actors and actors like just kind of representing their characters and voicing them for the game, which is pretty dope. That's interesting. I think that's pretty cool. The game visually doesn't look bad. It looks perfectly fine to me. It's not the most, graphically intensive game I've ever seen. It doesn't have like amazing visuals, but it looks good. It looks okay. It doesn't look bad at all. Now, I would say the next point is more of a neutral point. It really depends on how exactly it's utilized, but the game is going to be free to play. Now, on one hand, this is great because even though I'm not a big fan of the game Brawlhalla does have a big player base. It has a sizable player base, enough people to, keep the game sustainable, and that is a free-to-play platformer fighter in of itself. So maybe MultiVersus being free to play and also having established characters like Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Harley Quinn, like all these DC characters, Adventure Time characters, like all these different, properties coming in, that could help it in the long run. Like, people are going to be interested because of the properties, and because it's free to play, there isn't really like a barrier of entry. They can just come in and play. However, depending on its monetary strategy, that could be a problem. It really depends on how they do it. Some games do it just fine, and they, have a sizable fan base that doesn't really seem to mind how exactly the game is making its money. But if it's extremely egregious and very predatory, then the game could have a problem with its longevity. There's no way of knowing this. The game doesn't release until 2022, and we don't even know when in 2022, so it's kind of just up in the air. So we don't have enough information to judge the free-to-play aspect specifically. I would say that is a neutral thing right now. Like, I feel neutral about it. Like, it could be really good to get the player base high and keep it, keep the game going. But if the monetary side of the game is egregious, then it can be a problem just as much as it is a positive. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. Now, I do have two actual negatives, two concerns of mine. One of them I wouldn't even say it's a huge negative, but I am confused as to the decision of this, where essentially the game is releasing on all platforms but the Switch, which is an interesting decision because I feel as though whenever a platformer fighter comes out, the Switch just kind of feels like the home of platformer fighters, considering that, you know, Smash Brothers obviously is the most popular one. So many platformer fighters that have released over the years has eventually come to the Switch. Maybe not at first, but most of them have at first. I know Rivals of Aether came later, but it is on there. And to my knowledge, I believe, and I could be wrong on this, but I believe like these games typically sell best on either PC or Switch. And PC, of course, you know, you have your modding communities, and on Switch, you know, that's like the home of these kind of games. The king of those kind of games are on that console, so it feels right at home there. But MultiVersus is pretty much just skipping the Switch entirely, which is an interesting decision. I'm not sure if that's gonna bite them in the ass or not. I just think it's interesting. It's weird, and I like to believe that like the PC and Switch versions of Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl probably are the ones that sold the best. I have a hard time seeing like a lot of people playing it on the PlayStation and Xbox systems. Maybe you've played it on there. Let me know if you have. But to my knowledge, that was my impression, that those games sold best on those platforms. So MultiVersus will be on PC, so that makes sense. I'm just very confused as to why they're skipping a Switch version, but that it is what it is. And the other thing I'm a little concerned about is whether or not these developers have experience making a platformer fighter. Because at least with Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl, despite its bland presentation, the gameplay is solid. They may have a lot of problems with hitboxes, as I believe the game was rushed. So the hitboxes in All-Star Brawl aren't exactly good. They're very inaccurate. If you thought Smash Brothers hitboxes were bad, God help you when it comes to Nick All-Star Brawl. That game is much, much worse when it comes to the hitboxes. But other than the bland presentation, the game's gameplay is solid. It's made by Ludosity. Like, you know those guys from Slap City, and that game was very, very good on the gameplay front. So will MultiVersus have that level of depth to its combat, or is it going to be you know, a much more casual version of that kind of game, right? So I'm very interested to see where that goes. Not entirely sure on that end. The game is gonna have, you know, rollback netcode. The game's gonna have like some kind of like 2v2 mechanics in its combat, which I think is really cool. Like, you're gonna have like team combos kind of thing. Like, I know like with Bugs Bunny specifically, you can like burrow in his move just as much as he can when you're his teammate, and that's really interesting. That's actually a very unique thing that they can try doing. This game can have a very cool, like almost like Tekken Tag tournament type like situation where it's just you have cool combos going on, and 2v2s in Smash Brothers was already pretty cool. But this game, if the gameplay is solid and these 2v2 moves are like, you know, well made, this could be the definitive 2v2 platformer fighter. Who knows? Like, the game has a lot of potential right now. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that I'm more positive about this game than I was about Nick All-Star Brawl in the general scope. But in terms of gameplay and in terms of monetization, it is up in the air, and it can go either way for me. But that's kind of all I have for you guys. So let me know how you guys feel about this game in the comments. Are you going to play it? Are you going to install it in any way? And what platform are you planning on playing it on exactly? But that's all I have for you guys. So until then, I'll see you guys in the next one.
Shifty, yeah, shifty, wanna be the #1 gamer, come and get me. It'd be dope if you subscribe, could you like the vid please? Take your time, you don't gotta do it swiftly.